David Brewster here with New Brewster's Millions of Rants, and this is Playing with Feel. And it was late last summer, late August, early September, when I introduced the Playing with Feel concept to the 3 for All series of lessons on my channel. And since that time, I've made 6 episodes of 3 for All with the Playing with Feel, subheading. What Blue Saraceno, John Sykes, Michael Schenker, Chris Duarte, Steve Vai, and Robert Cray are the 6 players I've featured so far. And you could definitely, consider this episode a cherry on top of those ideas and those lessons, because we're going to dive even deeper here. And I've literally had hundreds of students ask me about this over the years. How do I play with more feel? How do I play with more energy or conviction or emotion? And we're basically talking about your hands-on approach, when you play riffs and fills and solos and licks on the guitar. And why does it sound so drastically different when you hear, David Gilmour or Billy Gibbons or Steve Vai or whoever it is, when you hear them play and then you try to play their licks and their music, it's that elusive area. Why do I not sound like that player? Or why doesn't it have the same feel or tone? And a lot of it is your hands and the hands-on, activity when you're playing guitar. This episode's going to reveal some of those secrets and dive even deeper. So here we go. So this next area I've noticed is really kind of a sensitive area or topic, for certain players out there. They get a little defensive or almost offended, when you start talking about this. But obviously there are different levels of ability, in musicians and guitarists out there. Duh. There's beginning, intermediate, advanced, and of course professional level too. But, there are literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of beginning methods out there for beginners. And I've worked with lots of beginners, hundreds and hundreds over the years. And I've worked with a lot of advanced players too, but usually advanced students or, advanced players, they're looking for very specific things, a certain area in their technique or in music theory, and they usually soak that information up, and then they disappear from your schedule, for 5 or 6 months, and then you might see them reappear again. But it's the intermediate players, they're literally stuck, they're no longer a beginner, they're not quite advanced, they're just kind of in that middle ground limbo, and there's millions and millions of intermediate players just kind of trapped and stuck in that area. And this image I'm getting ready to share, this might actually kind of demonstrate your progress as a musician. And I'm using a Polaroid camera, like Polaroid photo. And when it develops, like when you first snap the photo, it's blurry, you can't see any detail or images. You flap it around or shake it around a little bit in the air, and then like the middle area, you start to see, some of the detail. Obviously when it develops, then you have the vivid photo, complete detail, colors, and everything. So your musical journey might seem a little bit like this. And there's a series of quotes from Pink Floyd's famous Live at Pompeii from 1972, the home video, concert video. I have that on DVD. Highly recommended. Live at Pompeii is brilliant. But during that home video or whatever, the movie, there's a scene where like Pink Floyd's eating breakfast or they're eating like at a diner. And then you see Roger Waters manipulating keyboards in the studio. And there's this like, early 70s kind of techno-electronica, sounds coming out of his instrument. You hear him talking, and then you also hear David Gilmour talking, and they're kind of being interviewed and talking mainly about synthesizers is really what they're talking about. But that area of Live at Pompeii has always inspired me. I remember when I first saw it, I rewound that area because I heard the things Roger Waters was saying, and also David Gilmour too. And they were talking about keyboards and synthesis or synthesizers. But I relate what they talked about to the guitar. You could relate it to any instrument really, saxophone, drums, kazoo, whatever. But here's a quote from that area of Live at Pompeii from David Gilmour. And it's kind of explaining, like, this is really just an inanimate object, and it's not until somebody picks it up and starts to play it, that's when it comes to life and you hear the music come out. And that's basically what they were talking about. So the music ideas and examples in this episode were pulled from 5 different albums, and I literally could have picked anything. There are thousands and tens of thousands of examples I could have used. Different players, different songs, different bands, different eras, different styles of music. But these 5 examples that I'm sharing here are some of my favorites that I kind of use with my students. So I just kind of went to my go-to, examples or riffs and licks and stuff. But you could literally, translate or relate this to almost anything, any band, any style. Like maybe this isn't quite your style. Maybe you're more of a country player or funk player, jazz player, whatever. I mean, you could definitely adapt this concept to almost anything, but here's an image kind of showing you like where some of the music and ideas for this episode came from. Okay, first up, and this does explain why Metal Health's on the wall right there, but this is a fill from Metal Health, Bang Your Head from Quiet Riot. And this is a very simple fill. There's actually easier fills than this. You can just dive bomb an open string or a harmonic for a super easy fill. But this one moves across the strings and it's using a scale. But it's very basic, and I've used this with students for a long time. And it's basically the fill you hear right before the second verse, like this. So A minor pentatonic, and you're just kind of sidestepping your way down the scale. Very simple. One more time. Like that. So it's A minor pentatonic way up there. And we're doing this kind of sidestepping thing like that. So start there on the high E, and it's one note per string until you reach the bottom like that. First thing I want you to do right there is I'm playing it with a certain amount of feel. I'm not really digging in there, but I'm also not playing it limp-wristed and kind of quiet either. I'm just giving it kind of a medium range, hit, I guess, right there. So you could do it even lighter. And that sounds really boring. It sounds very kind of weak to me. And then you could exaggerate it and overdo it. But we're not really wanting to dig in quite that much. So you want to find a balance between the two. There's the really quiet, kind of weak one, and then the over, like heavy-handed, strong one. And then just kind of find that balance between the two, like this. So I'm picking with a certain level of authority. I'm also fretting with a certain, bit of authority. And I'm just kind of making my way down that pattern, like that. Now you could definitely take that, move it down an octave, and do it right there. You could do it in different keys, of course. You could use different positions, the minor pentatonic scale. But the important thing here is you're selecting something relatively basic, and you're really examining and studying how you're playing it. How are you fretting that? How are you picking that? And as far as picking, I was doing outside picking. I was doing an upstroke on the first note and a downstroke on the second note, and that's known as outside picking because my picking strokes are happening on the outside of those two strings. You could flip that and also practice inside picking where you're doing a downstroke on the high E and then an upstroke on the B, and that's known as inside picking, and it kind of feels like your pick's trapped on the inside of those two strings. So there's outside and inside. And I definitely would recommend practicing that right along with your vibrato and your feel as you practice that example. So when you start talking about playing with feel and energy, there's certain players that definitely come to mind. David Gilmour, who we just mentioned, obviously Billy Gibbons, Eddie Van Halen, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Gary Moore, Yngwie. There's a ton of guitarists that are known for very expressive feel and energy when they play. And one player I always mention is John Sykes. Of course, I love Thin Lizzy, Whitesnake, and Blue Murder. I'm a huge John Sykes fan. And we did technically feature him in the 3-for-All lessons as part of the Playing with Feel series. And this riff came from Crying in the Rain, which I love that song. But during the main riff, you can hear John playing with so much expression, aggression, and feel, like this. That part of the song. So it's an E, and he's obviously grabbing pinch harmonics in there too to make it sound even more aggressive and crazy. But it's this. And right there, you're grabbing that D note on the A string and then grabbing a pinch harmonic. And it's basically right around the middle. Like, if you're playing a 2-pickup guitar like this, it's kind of right there is the pitch he's hitting for that harmonic. It's not really there, it's not back back here either. It's right there. And he's picking hard, he's digging in, and it's super aggressive. You know, tons of feel right there in that riff. And that's just a riff. And of course the solo is just ripping your head off. One more time there. But definitely check out Crying in the Rain and just listen to John just digging in and just squealing like a pig. It's awesome. Okay, next up is the opening of the guitar solo from Who's Crying Now by Journey. Of course, Neil Schon on guitar, and I'm a huge Neil Schon fan and Journey fan. I love Neil. I mean, he's definitely one of the most expressive and melodic guitarists I can think of. Also, you know, Steve Lukather, Tom Schultz from Boston. There's lots of great melodic, you know, guitarists. And then Neil can shred your face off right after he's lulled you to sleep with these melodies. But this idea is very, very expressive. And something like this. One more time. Right? So we're basically doing this interesting bend where we keep grabbing this G note there on the high E string, and then we're descending, you know, that melodic note on the B string. So it's very simple, but it does require a lot of kind of emotive attention and feel, you know, for you to get it to sound like Neil, like that. So you're doing a bend that D to E, grab that G note, and then release that bend. Right? And then grab D by itself, grab that G again, and then you're grabbing C. And then to B. And then do it again. End of that pattern, just go down to this A, grab that B, and then you're going to milk, you know, a half step bend between B and C, like that. And that's super expressive. Lots of feel right there. Right? And then you do it again. Okay, the next one's a bit more obscure. This is Robina from Joe Satriani's Not of This Earth. And somewhere around 2 minutes and 17 seconds, you're going to hear this lick. And notice that he's kind of picking and handling, you know, the notes differently. It's not all played the same dynamic level. Some notes are a little softer, some notes are a little harder. He's also kind of palm muting and slight harmonics and stuff. Really interesting, short little melodic phrase, but like this. One more time. So right there, he's doing this kind of slip and slide melody right here in the beginning. Okay. So you're kind of moving between that E and F sharp, and then you're sliding A back to that F sharp. And then grab that G, and then go back to that E. And then you hear the slide, you know, B to A to B, and then F sharp, G to F sharp, and then D, D to E. Or D, 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 E, I guess. So really slow. Something like that. Very expressive, you know, there's a lot of feel and energy when he's playing that. And it's a very simple kind of sliding phrase, but I love it. Last but not least is the opening to the guitar solo from Breakdown Dead Ahead by Boz Scaggs. And this is Steve Lukather on guitar. And I'm a massive Steve Lukather fan. I love Steve. But it's this bouncy, playful blues rock kind of solo like this. first like opening of the solo. It keeps going. But Steve's basically targeting this, sliding into that E, grabbing G, and he grabs this A, and he starts doing this milked half-step bend between A and B flat, like this. Right? That's really expressive right there. Kind of reminds me of Joe Walsh a little bit right there. And after that part, right there, you're going to move down into like, you know, the box. It's kind of like a G minor pentatonic hybrid. I love that part where he's bouncing around right there, but grab this, and then really tasty right there. I love that. It's all in G, and it's that groove, kind of the Boz Scaggs groove right there. Alright, that's going to wrap this episode of Brewster's Millions of Rants with Playing with Feel. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, there are hundreds, if not thousands, or tens of thousands of other players and bands and songs and moments, you know, I could have featured in this episode. I really just gravitated toward some of the examples and ideas that I've shared with students over the years. But believe me, there's a ton of other, you know, areas you can kind of explore with this concept or idea in mind. And that includes rock, metal, blues, jazz, classical, acoustic music, whatever. You know, really, literally, any great guitarist or musician plays with a certain amount of feel, whether they intend to or not. It's just the human element. And that's something you have to think about. You know, there's only 12 notes in music, you know, the chromatic scale. So why does Beethoven sound so different compared to Metallica, compared to Boz Scaggs or somebody, or Bon Jovi, or, you know, Chet Atkins, or whoever we're talking about? Why do those 12 notes sound so radically different depending on, you know, what instrument or musician is performing them? And you have to think about guitarists, you know. If we had one guitar and one amp in a room full of players and passed that guitar around the room, it would radically sound different depending on who was playing it. So that's something you have to think about, and definitely something you have to address and practice on your own. Kind of, you know, absorb and acquire that ability of playing with feel and delivering that powerful energy, you know, in your music. So anyway, leave some feedback, comments, please subscribe to Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.